actually, almost everybody's been vaccinated, and if you haven't been, then it's your risk, you know, and he said, well, I haven't been vaccinated, and he said, they know I haven't, so they would call me out.
I call this meeting of the Energy and Water Development Subcommittee to order. Welcome to the fiscal year 2022 Energy and Water Development Subcommittee markup. I'm joined by my good friend, Mike Simpson, the ranking member who is here today, and I also want to welcome the full committee chair, Ms. DeLauro, ranking member Granger, and all of the subcommittee members who are here in person and those participating by secure video teleconference. Before I move to my opening statement, I'd like to offer a brief explanation of how this markup will work. Today's room has been configured to maintain the recommended 6-foot social distancing between members, staff, and the press corps in the room. As I mentioned, some members have opted to secure video teleconferencing, which allows them to participate remotely. For those on video conference, once you start speaking, there will be a slight delay before you are displayed on the main screen. Speaking into the microphone activates the camera, displaying the speaker on the main screen. Do not stop your remarks if you do not immediately see the screen switch. If the screen does not change after several seconds, please make sure you are not muted. To minimize background noise and ensure the correct speaker is being displayed, we ask that the members who are participating by video remain on mute unless you have sought recognition. In terms of the speaking order, we will follow our traditional order, speaking with chair and ranking, beginning with the chair and ranking member of the subcommittee, then the chair and ranking member of the full committee, and then any other members who wish to speak. Finally, we have set up an email address in which members can send anything they wish to submit in writing at any of the hearings or markups, including amendments, motions, other unanimous consent requests, and so on. That email has been provided to your staff. I would remind all members that they must verbally request unanimous consent out loud, separately from sending the document or written unanimous consent request to the email address. And now I would like to move to my opening statement. Today, we will consider the fiscal year 2022 funding bill for energy and water development and related agencies. This legislation not only meets the needs of the current moment, our bill provides a foundation for addressing the challenges our nation will increasingly face as a result of population growth, the changing environment, and certainly the changing climate. Headlines this week tell the story. In the LA Times, Lake Mead, a lifeline for water and electricity, tips toward crisis at its lowest level in 85 years. In Chicago and the Great Lakes, the New York Times reports that the past few years have been the wettest on record. I can personally attest to that, driving yesterday back here to Washington, 7.5 hours of pounding rainstorms from western Ohio through Pennsylvania through northern Maryland. I never thought I would get out of it. Definitely, that was the worst trip of my life. We read the news that an Oregon wildfire is robbing California's critical electric supply as the bootleg fire doubles again in terms of acres covered, burning along an 8-mile stretch of high-voltage power lines. Our goal on this subcommittee remains to provide the necessary energy and water assets to help sustain life in our nation. This investment of over $53 billion will provide strategic resources to communities to address these changing environmental challenges, as well as those struggling to recover from decades of underinvestment, while creating good-paying jobs in communities left behind in the transition to a new economy. Our bill does so partly by rebuilding long-neglected critical energy and water infrastructure. Our bill also enhances our national security through a robust nuclear capability and deterrent. This legislation, a core component of our promise to the American people to build back better, will better connect power, goods, and services to markets and provide for the safe delivery of energy and water to over 31 million people. After this past year, where the stable and affordable delivery of fossil fuels to consumers has repeatedly been disrupted, the need to diversify our energy sources has never been more urgent. This legislation takes concrete steps to develop and deploy the infrastructure necessary to ensure a cleaner, greener, affordable, and more reliable energy future from all sources, as well as push harder to develop new sources right here in the USA for energy independence. And the bill provides necessary resources within our water agencies to help address the worsening western drought and to enhance our freshwater resources. Our goal is to sustain energy and water independence for the secure future of our nation. Let me briefly walk through the priorities and investments in the 2022 funding bill for energy and water development for our nation. The bill provides $8.6 billion to the Army Corps of Engineers to support water infrastructure through our great nation, an increase of $1.9 billion above the budget request. It provides $1.9 billion to the Bureau of Reclamation, an increase of $413 million above the request, an institution so vital to our dry West. It provides $191 million for programs to respond to the severe drought crippling much of the West. It makes use of the budgetary adjustment for the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund included in the Water Resource Development Act, so important to our ports. And by the way, that WRDA Act was developed as of 2020. And finally, it provides $45.1 billion for the Department of Energy, an increase of $3.2 billion above fiscal year 2021 amounts. And within the Department of Energy itself, the bill provides historic levels of funding across applied energy and science programs at our nation's finest research labs that propel innovation from coast to coast. And it provides this historic funding level across applied energy and science programs. The bill provides $3.77 billion for energy efficiency and renewable energy, $906 million above the enacted. $600 million for advanced research on energy at ARPA-E, $173 million above the enacted. And it provides $398 million for a modernized weatherization program, $83 million above the enacted, to help assure that low-income households have energy-efficient and more livable homes. We also will fund, for the first time, within the Department of Energy, a sensible and more comprehensive program that helps make improvements to homes with structural, health, or safety defects that would otherwise be unable to participate in the traditional weatherization program. And I would like to thank Full Committee Chair DeLauro and also Subcommittee Chair of Labor HHS for her cooperation in this. With blistering heat, punishing storms, and debilitating drought enveloping the nation just this month, this bill provides resources for a comprehensive weatherization program, finally. And additionally, the bill responsibly funds America's nuclear deterrent and increases funding for non-proliferation programs. In short, the bill meets and mandates by providing critical funding for water infrastructure, clean energy, and promotes a credible nuclear deterrent, all the while supporting good-paying jobs related to updating key infrastructure in every region of our country. I'd like to thank all of our subcommittee members for their engagement, and want to thank my very able ranking member, Mr. Simpson, and thank Chair DeLauro and Ranking Member Granger as well for their strong support. Finally, I'd like to thank our wonderful staff who worked tirelessly and really seamlessly to put this bill together. Jamie Shimmick, Scott McKee, Mike Brain, Brian Smith, Will Osterog, Lauren Like, Matt Kaplan, and Angie Giancarlo. I'll now turn to Mr. Simpson for his opening remarks.
Thank you, Chairwoman Kaptur. I have to say before I start that Mr. Calvert and I were sitting here thinking, when you were talking about all that rain that you had to drive through coming back here, if there's some way that we could take the Keystone Pipeline and put water in it and move it to the west, since we're not going to use it for anything else, I guess, that'd be nice. We'd like that. So maybe that'll be part of our bill by the time we're done.
Well, you know what, Mr. Simpson, I've often wondered about all the flooding we're experiencing and how great we can think as a Congress and as a people in view of what we're facing.
Yeah.
I was hoping yesterday that Johnstown didn't get flooded, actually, as I went through that part of Pennsylvania.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Chairwoman Capter. I'd like to thank you for presenting the Energy and Water Bill today. Each year seems to have different challenges. This year was a very late budget request and the introduction of community project funding requests. It is clear that the majority worked hard to address individual members' priorities from both sides of the aisle, and I thank the Chair for that consideration. Taken in isolation, there are many things in the majority's mark that the House Republicans could support. In particular, strong support for the Corps of Engineers, including specific community project funding and additional programmatic funding, is a bipartisan priority. Of great importance to me is the Department of Energy's nuclear energy program. I appreciate the Chairwoman's efforts to address many of my priorities within that account. While I am disappointed to see no funding for the Versatile Test Reactor, I am pleased to see increased funding for the 3 demonstration projects for work on microreactors, including the MARVEL program, and for work to ensure a supply of high-assay, low-enriched uranium, which will be necessary for many of the next-generation reactors. Unfortunately, these individual good items are within an overall framework that the House Republicans cannot support. Like the President's budget request, the majority's energy and water bill overfunds certain non-defense programs and shortchanges our national security needs. An increase of less than 1% for the weapons activities does not even keep up with inflation. We must provide the resources necessary to continue the nuclear modernization program to ensure a safe, reliable, and effective stockpile. With respect to non-defense energy programs, the policies coming from the majority and the Biden administration, as reflected in the priorities of this bill, largely ignore the fact that climate change is a function of global emissions. This bill embraces the policy priorities that focus on reducing U.S. emissions in a way that almost certainly would result in an increase in global emissions and therefore not reduce the impact of climate change. In closing, I'd like to thank Chairwoman Capter and the majority staff for their dedication and hard work to this bill. I'd also like to thank Ms. DeLauro and Ms. Granger for the full committee, from the full committee for their leadership and support of the important programs in this bill. I look forward to working together on this bill as it moves through the legislative process to develop a final energy and water bill that reflects a balanced set of priorities that can be supported by members on both sides of the aisle. And I thank you for your consideration, Chairwoman Capter.
Thank you very much, Ranking Member Simpson. I now yield to the full committee chair, Rosa DeLauro, for her remarks.
Thank you, Chairwoman Capter and Ranking Member Simpson, for collaborating on this important bill. And I want to say a thank you to the subcommittee, the full committee, and the personal office staff for their dedicated work in this effort. Over the past year, the COVID-19 pandemic has shed light on many of our nation's greatest challenges and exacerbated disparities in our economy. And it has reminded us that everything is connected and that a failure anywhere can have a catastrophic consequence everywhere. The energy and water development funding before us takes critical action to confront the climate crisis and rebuild our water infrastructure while creating good-paying jobs and fostering a clean, affordable, and secure energy future. This legislation is the product of 6 hearings to address issues such as domestic manufacturing, water resources infrastructure, and energy innovation. Chairwoman Capter has rightly put a focus on how we can foster a shared prosperity that reaches corners of our nation that have been left behind for far too long. By deploying clean energy technologies in communities across the country, this bill will create good-paying jobs in new and dynamic sectors and help our communities recover from the economic devastation of this pandemic. The more than $14 billion of transformative investments in clean energy and science will help develop clean, affordable, and secure American energy, setting our nation on a path that is a better one and a much more stable course. So as we face worsening drought and more frequent and severe storms, Our nation's water infrastructure must be rebuilt with a focus on resiliency so that our infrastructure can survive catastrophic natural disasters. And that is exactly what this bill aims to do. So I say thank you again to Chairwoman Capter and Ranking Member Simpson and their staff for their work, and I urge my colleagues to support this bill.
Thank you very much, Chair DeLauro. I know how busy you are, and we thank you very much for participating today. I now yield to the full committee ranking member, Kay Granger, for her remarks.
Thank you very much. Madam Chair, thank you for bringing forward the fiscal year 2022 Energy and Water Development and Related Agencies Appropriations Bill today. I also want to thank the ranking member, Mr. Simpson, for his leadership on the subcommittee. As a result of your work, this bill addresses the priorities of members on both sides of the aisle and does many good things for the American people. In particular, I appreciate that this bill continues significant funding for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for our navigation and flood control projects that are so important to our economy and public safety. Unfortunately, just like with the other bills the committee has considered, this bill is based on a funding framework that lacks bipartisan support. I am also concerned that the funding decisions in this could leave us vulnerable to that do not have our best interest at heart. For example, the bill significantly underfunds efforts to modernize our nuclear weapons complex. We must have a reliable and effective nuclear deterrent to ensure our national security. On the non-defense side of the bill, funding priorities are focused primarily on activities that will reverse the gains in this energy independence we've made over the past decade. The approach taken in this bill will actually cause us to increase our dependence on China for critical minerals. A bipartisan agreement on the overall funding framework would allow us to better address these national security concerns. I hope we can resolve these issues in a timely manner so this year's appropriations bills can be signed into law. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Granger, for participating today and for your remarks. Are there any other members wishing to speak on behalf of the bill? Are there any amendments to the bill? Seeing none, I would like to recognize Ms. Kirkpatrick for a motion, and I ask for your support for this bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to favorably report the Energy and Water Development Appropriations Act 2022 to the full committee.
The motion, or the question is on the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Aye.
Nope. Those opposed, no?
No.
No.
In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The motion is agreed to. I ask unanimous consent that the staff be permitted to make technical and conforming changes to the bill and report just approved. Seeing no objection, so ordered. A bit of housekeeping. Please make sure that you leave all copies of your bill and report at the desk. With that, thank you very much. This meeting stands adjourned. Thank you.
Did you ever hear about the time that I was